Just Like Mother by Anne Heltzel sounds like exactly my kind of book on the surface. A creepy horror slash thriller novel with messed up cults, creepy as hell dolls, and a really interesting commentary on the role of women and more specifically mothers in society. In addition, the fact that the main character was a woman who was initially quite vocal about her child-free status was also very, very appealing to me. When you think about it, there aren't actually that many child-free characters in fiction, especially not positive portrayals of them, and especially not protagonists in stories. And so it's really nice to feel represented and see more and more books being written today with child-free protagonists. All that said, while I found myself really engrossed by this book and really enjoying it as I was reading it, I sped through the whole thing so quickly. I read it in a couple of days, really enjoyed it, wanted to see where the plot was going, liked the twists and turns in places, liked the writing style. While all that is said, I also felt incredibly let down by the ending of the novel, and today I want to use this as an opportunity to discuss Just by Mother in detail and compare it and contrast it to another book, The Cows by Dawna Porter, which also features a female protagonist who is child-free by choice. I want to have a look at some of the different attempts at positive portrayals of child-free women in fiction and talk about what they did well and what they didn't, and that's what we're doing today. Yeah, before we jump into the bulk of this video though, I just have to apologise. My voice is still absolutely gone. I've had this horrific flu for the past 5 days. There's this like strep bacteria thing going around at the minute, and I think that might be what I had, and I was so ill. I've not left my bed for 5 days. This is the first time I've been like properly up and out and like able to stand up for more than 5 minutes without falling over basically. I have taken quite a lot of cold and flu tablets, and by quite a lot I mean, you know, the usual dose, the recommended dose, but yeah, they're what's keeping me awake at the minute. But I'm still a little bit croaky, I'm still very tired, I'm still very achy. I'm just trying to work through this because unfortunately I do still have rent to pay. You'll have to excuse the fact that like all my nose here is just like bright red and sore and screaming in pain from me like sneezing and blowing my nose so much. Is what a lovely start to this video. God, it even hurts to smile. So if you'll excuse all that, and just, you know, thank you for being patient with me, and thank you for sticking with me through this and my little foggy brain that I still have. I really do get brain fog when I'm ill. I'm a bit of a mess. So let's start by discussing Just Like Mother by Anne Heltzel. And warning, there are going to be many, many, many spoilers ahead, so if you've not read the book, please bear that in mind, and if you do want to read the book, I recommend you go ahead and go away and read it first, and then you can come back to this video afterwards, because there will be many spoilers for this and the cows in this video. So the novel Just Like Mother is the story of Maeve, who grew up in a small but intense cult, which essentially worshipped biological women and motherhood and said screw you to absolutely everyone else. No exaggeration. The details of the cult are revealed to us slowly throughout the novel, but we eventually learn that it's a group of around 6 or so women who all live with their numerous daughters, and together they kidnap and rape and eventually kill a bunch of men in order to get them pregnant. Once they're pregnant, if the baby's a boy, it's born and then eventually discarded and killed, but if it's a girl, she's raised to eventually become one of the mothers too. These women are only ever referred to as mothers. Mother, 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 no other identifying features. You know, occasionally we'll get the blonde mother, the red-haired mother, the strict mother, but they're all just mothers, and it's very clear that they're grooming the young girls right from the moment they're born to carry on their legacy, to carry on this cult, to instill these same beliefs in them that women are superior, motherhood is superior, men are evil and to be feared and only useful for one thing, producing sperm. Eventually, Maeve manages to escape this cult, but in doing so, she accidentally gets her little brother killed while she's trying to protect him. And this is kind of the premise to the whole book. The book then jumps forward in time about 20 years to Maeve as an adult, but the whole premise of the book is based on what happened in her childhood and how that's affected her as an adult, essentially. And I thought this was a really interesting and honestly terrifying premise, because it subverts so many expectations that we have of this genre of fiction. Normally, these kinds of stories with cults, which I do find interesting, so I do read quite a lot of them, normally these stories are based on real-world cults who do tend to be quite misogynistic. In these cases, the men are the ones with the power. They oppress and abuse the women. Women are seen as nothing but baby-making objects who are to be used and discarded, essentially. But this book takes that premise and swings in completely the opposite direction. In this book, in this story, in this world, men are dehumanized and women are the powerful ones. While men have traditionally oppressed women because of our biology, these women are saying no more. They're celebrating those biological differences and saying that it's their ability to give birth and produce life that makes them superior to men, that gives them this right to abuse and control and hurt men ultimately. It's an interesting approach, definitely a subversion of expectations, but don't get me wrong, it's still absolutely wrong, oppressive, abusive, and terrifying. These women, despite being all, yeah, women strong, women best, are not feminists. They're abusers, they're oppressive, they're just as bad. They are very clearly the villains in this horror novel, don't get me wrong. The way they treat men is disgusting and inexcusable, and it's not okay. We have to remember that, like, while there are some feminist undertones to this book, these aren't feminist characters, they're still the villains in a horror novel. Please don't get me wrong, that is very much the case. It's not like any of the bad things they do are being encouraged or promoted or celebrated. And of course, as well as being oppressive to men, there are huge issues with them only celebrating biological women, as they like to call them. The cult completely craps all over trans women, infertile women, and women who choose never to have kids. They even publicly shame and tell horror stories of Bloody Marys, who it's later revealed are women who have either had an abortion at some point, who support abortion, or who reject the idea of motherhood altogether. These are women who the kids are literally told nightmarish stories about, they're told to stay away from them. These kids have literally bad dreams about Bloody Marys coming to get them. It's really messed up, and it just kind of shows how deep indoctrination of this kind goes. Basically, yeah, they're great villains, but villains nonetheless. So in the present day, Maeve is all grown up and she's clearly traumatized from her childhood in the cult, and she works a job as an editor which consumes her whole life, and we're told this is a very bad thing. She's underpaid, which is a very bad thing. She's not really appreciated in her job, which also is a bad thing. But she doesn't have a real boyfriend. She just has someone who she enjoys having sex with and who is kind and caring and treats her well, even though there's no labels on it, and we're told this is a very bad thing. And she also decides that she doesn't ever want children, because of the trauma she went through in the past. She saw her little brother die in front of her, and now she never wants children because no woman would be child-free without it being related to trauma, right? We'll discuss more on that later. I have issues with that whole narrative in all fiction. So about 20 years after leaving this cult, Maeve is contacted by her cousin, who was also in the cult growing up with her, and Maeve has been searching for her for years and never able to find her. She's like, yeah, we were best friends growing up, we were so super close, she was always there for me, she's wonderful. But honestly, no. Like, the cousin Andrea seemed like a little bit of a bitch from the beginning. She was an absolute bully. Like, the story opens with her taking Maeve into the woods and telling her creepy stories of Bloody Marys and then scaring her and purposely, like, you know, trying to get her into trouble, and then she does get into trouble. It's a whole thing. Basically, Andrea was a bully from childhood, but a manipulative one who would make her feel like hell and then be like, oh no, but we're best friends, we're always going to be together. Yeah, one of those people. But they reconnect in adulthood and it's all happy and all wonderful, and they're like, oh my god, this is wonderful, I missed you so much, I'm your besties. And we find out that the two women had very, very different lives for the last 20 years. After leaving the cult, Maeve was adopted by a lovely family who supported her, but who are now very old and in nursing homes or dead, and so now she's alone and miserable, apparently. Whereas Andrea was passed around from care home to care home, but she eventually put herself through college and is now a millionaire who runs a self-help life coaching company and has recently just bought a tech company who make these creepy as hell animatronic baby doll robot things to apparently teach people how to parent, or also help grieving parents who've lost their own kids and they want to replace them with a creepy robot version. Yeah, you see the horror elements coming in now. Andrea is rich and successful and famous and married, and she did have a baby herself, but the baby sadly died. We never find out why, but we do know that now Andrea can't have any more children of her own. So, with this tech company that she now owns, she made a creepy robot exact replica of her baby and spends hours every day cuddling it and nursing it and treating it like a real human. The robot babies are definitely one of the creepiest elements in this book, and they definitely cause a few really disturbing moments, but I do wish that the author would kind of push this horror element a bit further I do wish they'd had a larger role in the whole story and they'd been a little bit more influential towards the plot, especially towards the end. But a bit of a missed opportunity, but still creepy nonetheless. So despite being really successful and put together on the surface, Andrea immediately starts trying to control and manipulate Maeve and her life, and she gets her to move in with her, and again, spoilers, because this is only like slowly revealed throughout the whole book, but I did see it coming and thought it was obvious, but anyway, spoilers. Turns out Andrea is still a part of the cult that they grew up in. She was properly groomed and brainwashed since birth, and so even after leaving the cult, she carried it on, and she turned what was a little 6-person family cult into now a whole worldwide cult network, basically, disguised as life coaching and self-help and all this kind of thing, like a lifestyle brand. We're going to help change your life, blah blah blah. It's really messed up. She has millions of followers. It's huge now, and in reality she's just brainwashing all these women around the world, getting them to pop out as many female babies as possible and abuse the men in their lives. Very early on in the book, we meet Andrea's best friend and business partner Emily and her husband Micah and their tiny infant son. Emily is also pregnant at this point with a baby girl, and it's very clear that Emily and Micah have been indoctrinated by Andrea and the cult from the way that Emily treats her husband and kid. She basically treats Micah, the husband, like a slave. She talks down to him. She even says at one point lines like, oh, well, you know, they're only good for one thing and stuff like that. And she barely interacts with her baby boy. She leaves most of the care for him up to Micah, and she's like, yeah, well, I love him because he's my baby, but still really want a girl, can't wait for a girl, all that sort of thing. And yet, she spends the whole time talking about how important motherhood is, and how she can't wait for her baby girl, and how being a mother's the only thing women should be doing, and all that sort of thing. At one point, Emily starts on this rant and gets into a little bit of a debate with Maeve, and I'll try and read you an abridged version of this so you can get an idea of this scenario. What else is there really besides motherhood? Emily was asking rhetorically. Like, what's the point of anything else? She went on, motioning theatrically with her water glass. I mean, just look at all these people who are so driven by money or dead-end careers they forget what's really important and miss out on all that joy, she added, addressing the entire table like she was giving a TED talk she performed several times already. Then regret it when it's too late, she shuddered. God, what a sad life. Andrea shot me a sympathetic look, which did not go unnoticed by Emily. Oh, Maeve, I didn't mean... It's okay, I told her, waving her hand. You've got loads of time, she told me, smiling generously. A woman from my book club got pregnant at 42. I'm not waiting for anything, I wanted to say. There's no ticking clock, but I bit my tongue. I wouldn't say loads of time, Micah contributed. What? He asked, raising both hands in the air. Don't shoot the messenger. It's just a fact that 90% of your eggs are gone by age 30. You still look great, though, he assured me. You won't have any trouble finding a partner, unless you have some skeletons in your closet you haven't mentioned. He laughed like it was the most hilarious thing in the world. I tasted something sour in the back of my throat. Actually, I said quietly, I don't want to have children. Why won't this conversation end? There was a silence, and I wish I'd waited to say something without Emily and Micah there. I just never thought motherhood was for me. I hoped Andrea would understand and stand up for me again, but Emily ploughed on. I've never met a woman who regretted having kids, Emily insisted. I have, I replied more sharply than I intended to. A lot of women who give babies up for adoption do. Maybe they don't regret their decision to bring a kid into the world, but some might regret needing to make that decision at all. And other women who I've met who weren't sure it was worth it, giving up their careers and their lives for this whole other path they choose to follow because everyone said they should, not because they truly wanted it. Those women love their kids, sure. Still, sometimes they find themselves mourning another life they can never reclaim. And what about the women who have kids just because it's what you do, and then realise they aren't cut out for it? Well, it is sort of just what you do, Emily replied. Right? It's the greatest power we've been given as women. It's what we were made to do. Like I said, skeletons, Micah broke in, shaking his head. This is probably why you don't have a partner. Whether you're religious or not, Emily barreled on, you can't deny the science of pregnancy and childbirth is semi-miraculous and incredibly empowering. It's one thing if a woman can't physically have children. Obviously, those situations are tragic. But to deny your body its natural right when you're able to have them sounds confused at best. Honestly, at first I was so happy to see this in a book because Maeve is saying exactly what so many of us child-free women feel, and she's having to put up with hearing all this crap that we hear from people all the time. All this rubbish about it's natural. No one regrets having kids, even though plenty do. Childbirth's the best and only thing a woman should do. If you don't want kids, no man will ever want you. Pity, 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 judge, judge, judge. All of that absolute rubbish. I hear the same thing in comments all the time on my videos, and it's exhausting and tiring and ridiculous. I did love that Maeve was attempting to stand up for herself and call this out for the crap that it is, but sadly she kind of gave up quite quickly, and she was almost like apologetic for her views. You know, at the end of this scene, she just like ran away and cried in a bathroom. And that was a little disappointing. I wish she'd been a little bit stronger in her convictions, but it was at least refreshing to see some of these stupid ideas at least partially challenged in a novel. I think that's a really important thing to do. I do enjoy books that discuss these ideas and beliefs, and I think it's important. And I think if the whole book had been like these sections here, I would have been praising it more instead of having mixed feelings, but we'll get onto the mixed feelings in a bit. Let's take a look at a few other sections that are, again, a little hit and miss, most of them more hit than miss, thankfully, at the beginning of the book. So in this scene, Maeve has just asked Emily how she's feeling about her second pregnancy, and Emily replies with, "You asked how we're feeling about it, but you know, the mere act of not wanting a baby is wrong. It's almost akin to rejecting ourselves because we have to reject a fundamental part of our womanhood in order to reject having children." "I don't agree," I said carefully. "Sorry, Maeve," she said, her voice tight. "We feel differently on this one. It's not as if no one ever struggles with pregnancy, you know. You just have to accept that challenge as part of the journey. That's the new life philosophy." "Is that really what you think, though?" I turned to her. "Because, Emily, it isn't wrong. It's okay to dislike your kids sometimes. It's okay to dislike Micah, to be exhausted and angry. It's okay to feel whatever you want about the whole thing. It's not just okay, it's normal. You're this amazingly strong woman with an incredible career. You have a choice. This entire thing, it's a choice. Whether to have a partner, whether to be a parent." I thought I had her. I saw her eyes catch mine. Spark. "You sound awfully patronising for someone who isn't a parent." Again, I was loving Maeve's character at this point and hating Emily's, because Emily sounds so much like people in my comments who tell me I just need to stop being selfish and put up with pregnancy. It's my job as a woman to have a kid and all that rubbish. But this passage actually reminds me of a comment I got on one of my Childfree videos in which a person told me I couldn't accurately comment on anything to do with being child-free until I'd had a kid myself and knew what it was like. Do you see the problem with that? I was like, wait. You want me, a person who doesn't want children, who is talking about why I don't want children, to go away and have a child and likely end up hating my life before I can publicly keep talking about how I don't want children? How does that make any sense? But yeah, back in regards to this book, it's nice to see these topics being discussed and refuted, especially in a horror book, but again, there's a problem with it. So towards the end of the book, Andrea hosts an event with something like 30-odd women who are all pregnant or trying to get pregnant. And this is clearly basically like a cult meeting that they've all paid tens of thousands of dollars to attend. And she reminds me so much of these like typical self-help gurus and charismatic cult leaders and fundy influencers, especially when she gives this speech. "The upcoming 7 days," Andrea went on, "will be full of challenges and opportunities for growth and reflection. We'll discuss why you've been called to motherhood, what it means to fulfill this sacred role, why motherhood," here her voice rose in pitch, "is the single most important and valuable calling on this earth. We won't be subdued. We are women, and we have the ultimate power, a power no man could ever have, the power of motherhood." And God, the anti-man part aside, this is so similar to videos I've reviewed by loads of Christian influencers here on my channel. I'm pretty sure this whole rant about the connection between womanhood and motherhood and it being like the ultimate power and something they're called to do, that's almost word for word what I've heard from people like Paul and Morgan and Classically Abby and Hannah, what's her name? You know who I mean. People like that before. And this is another reason that I found this book so scary and think it makes a great horror book, because it's so believable. I fully believe there are women out there who probably have these views. They maybe don't take them to the extent of raping and kidnapping and killing men like the cult do, but also I'm like, well, I think maybe they could. Maybe they would. Where this fictional cult differs in some ways from today's fundies, though, is how they talk about men. Although I'd argue the underlying emotions are pretty much the same, they just have sort of different motivations, if that makes sense. There's this idea amongst both the cult members in the book and fundies in real life that marriage is just something that you do. It's expected. It's an obligation. You pick someone proper and you raise kids with them, and that is it. That is your life. That is all your life can be and should be about. And it's quite sad, really. There were some parts of this book that I liked but left me a little confused. Like there was this great section where it was pointed out how men doing as much childcare as women is just how it should be because men aren't babysitters to their own children. And I was like, yes, love that sentiment. Thank you. More of that, please. I think it's an important thing that we don't talk about enough. But the fact that that line was said by a woman who is a complete villain kind of made me question, well, like, what's the author's intention here? Emily says, "It's such a blessing to be able to bring children into the world. I'm lucky. I really do have it all." She bit her lip, loosening a bit of cracked skin with her teeth. "Having a girl will be the best thing that's ever happened to us. I think it's great that Micah parents just as much as you do." My words sounded wooden even to me. Why wouldn't he? Micah's a great dad. That's why I picked him. I could have picked anyone, but you have to choose right. A lot rides on it. "He seems terrific," I acknowledged, lying to placate her. "I know you both work hard." "Men aren't babysitters of their own children," Emily told me. "They shouldn't be rewarded for providing equal or more childcare. Micah's contribution to Henry's upbringing shouldn't be notable. And if Micah isn't useful as a parent, well then..." She shrugged. "What's the point?" I wondered if Micah knew her thoughts on the matter, if he knew where he really stood. So yeah, the fact that Emily, who is clearly part of this villainous cult in this horror story, is coming out with lines like, you know, men aren't babysitters of their own children, which is a fantastic important point. Like I say, this makes me question the author's intention. Is she trying to critique this idea of men being equal parents, or is she trying to show that villains with warped ideas can still be right sometimes? Or what was she trying to do here? What is she trying to get across? This was one of the first bits of the book that made me feel conflicted about what the author's actual intention was and her message with, honestly, this entire novel. There are other parts as well that were not so good, like when Maeve wonders, "I wasn't sure. Emily didn't seem to love Micah so much as tolerate his company. She was the powerful one. Everyone revolved around her, and it seemed like she was perfectly happy with that arrangement." Which again reminds me a lot of like fundy beliefs, but with the genders reversed. So I see a lot of couples or Christian couples on YouTube who talk about the importance of marriage and how you need to get married, you need to find the right partner, but they don't actually seem to like each other all that much. They just sort of tolerate each other and almost use each other, co-parent and get something out of each other because they think it's the proper thing and the way things need to be done. Kristen from Girl Defined is probably one of the first people who springs to mind. She's spoken in videos a lot about not being attracted to her husband, about how she struggles with sinful thoughts while trying to have sex with him, and all sorts of stuff like that. And I don't know, it just seems very odd, like it was a marriage of obligation rather than love and passion and enjoying each other's company, you know? And that just seems kind of sad for me. And that's what the characters in this book do, which, again, is upsetting. And just like fundies, even though Emily's character seems to not actually like her husband, she's perfectly happy to lecture Maeve about how she needs to find a husband to be happy. Emily's like, well, it doesn't matter if I like him or not. I'm doing the proper thing, and that makes me happy, and therefore you should do it too, you know? Because that's the only way you'll be happy. She says to Maeve, "When Micah came around and suddenly I wasn't doing everything by myself, the anxiety evaporated. I had a partner, and we had a family, and a job that gave us both a sense of purpose. I went up a gene size, so what? Worth it for the mental gains. I'm glad he's been good to you." "You can have it too," Emily told me. "And then you can have a real home of your own, a nice forever place that you can fill up over time." "I want that, just not your version of that. More like a cute one-bedroom apartment with a nice nest egg and sure, maybe a partner if the right one came along, but maybe not." "Maybe you're looking for something that doesn't exist," Emily suggested, as if she'd read my mind. She shook her hair over one shoulder and looked at me. "Let's face it, there's nothing sadder than a woman in her late 30s or 40s who's all alone." God, she shuddered. And when talking about women who enjoy being single or who don't want kids or who get fulfillment out of her career, Emily goes on to say, "It's just bad luck disguised as empowerment. she went on, patting my stiff shoulder. Don't worry, that won't be you. There's still time to get your life together. New York's full of pretty women, but you're smart. Just don't waste all that intelligence on your job instead of building your own story. And I don't mean with someone like that bartender you've been seeing. I'm sure you have a hot connection and all, but meaningless hookups were a thing best left in our 20s. Perfect is the enemy of good, Maeve. I just know there's someone out there who'll be a devoted partner to you, even if you don't have fiery sex. Oh God, I hate all of this. But I do love Maeve's response, which is, I don't think a man is the answer to all of my problems. I don't want to be less happy just for the sake of not being alone. Which is something that I've always said myself, especially in my videos. I've always said I'd rather be happy alone than with the wrong person. It's why I've been so fussy when it comes to dating in the past, especially this last year or so. And I'm happy that I kind of like waited and found a really, really wonderful man. Normally I agree with the statement about perfection being being the enemy of good when it comes to things like maybe creating artwork or getting started making something, writing, creating, learning a new skill. But when it comes to relationships, I couldn't disagree more. When it's something that big, sometimes nothing is better than just anything. I actually have a poem vaguely related to this in my poetry book, which is out now and available on Amazon if you want to get it. The poem is called Spoil, and it's about this spoiled little kid who keeps demanding more and more things from people when she's having a birthday party. So she starts with like eating all the cake by herself and stealing party bags and gathering presents from people, and then that's not enough for her, so she ends up pickpocketing from the other kids. And then when she's like, oh no, I'm hoarding all this stuff and it's still not enough for me, I want more and more and more, then she goes and she starts like collecting rubbish from bins and putting it all together into this big pile. But then the rubbish she's collected starts to rot the good stuff she's collected, and soon everything is spoiled and ruined because she just wanted more of everything and couldn't say no, and she wasn't picky about what she wanted. It's meant to be kind of an analogy for certain famous people who waste their talents and gifts by just demanding more and more attention for absolutely anything and everything, even bad behaviour, and how ultimately that ends up souring their whole careers because their greedy need for any kind of attention ends up undermining and overshadowing and basically souring the talents and skills that they do have. But I think we can also apply the analogy here, where if you build a wonderful life for yourself with no partner in it, it'll still be wonderful. But if you build a wonderful life for yourself and then just go pick up any partner you can find, grab the first one from the bin and bring him into your life, it's gonna rot everything else, you know? You need to be picky about the things that you accept into your life and be very careful about it. So yeah, if you're interested, that poem's called Spoil, and it's in my collection, Reflections from Healing, which is out now. And I just thought it was worth mentioning that it's there. Still have brain fog. Anyway, and also if you are interested, that book also has a poem called Room, which is about being child-free by choice as well. So there you go. Back to these books though. There's also a part in the story where Andrea asks Maeve to be a surrogate for her, and Maeve is like, nope, hell no. No. And it causes so much drama. But the real horror element comes in when it turns out Andrea has been drugging her cousin while she's been living with her, getting her husband to rape Maeve while she's asleep with the intention of impregnating her. And it works. This is genuinely terrifying and one of the scariest bits of a horror book I've ever read because it's so realistic. I actually felt really sick and scared when I was reading it. It grossed me out so much. And then towards the end of the book, I liked where the ending seemed to be going. Emily went crazy and ended up hospitalized. The husbands were killed by crazy cult mothers. Maeve escaped and decided to get an abortion. Great. Brilliant. This seems like a good ending to the book. But it's too late into the pregnancy. Maeve can't get an abortion, so she has to have the babies. Forced pregnancy. Horrifying. And then there's another twist where Maeve has the babies and she's planning to give them up for adoption. Then she's like, oh no, wait, changed my mind last minute. I want to keep them, which made me angry at first. But then there's another twist that actually no, she still wants to get rid of the babies, but she used keeping them as like a way to try and trap Andrea, who'd gone on the run so she could be arrested, and it was like a whole thing. Okay, cool. So after that twist, she remains child-free, stuck to her values, great ending, I respect that, love that. But no, wait, there's more. Again. There's another twist at the end of the book, in that the adoptive mother, it turns out, is actually part of the cult too, and the cult is still going, no one can ever really escape, it's so big and influential now, and blah blah blah. Scary, but typical ominous horror book ending, but that's not the bit that bothered me. The bit that bothered me was that Maeve finds out about this because she's still regularly going to visit these twins that she gave birth to, that she's given up for adoption. She's their auntie, and she's still in their lives all the time. And, now it turns out that basically these kids are her family, and now she's settled down, and she's found the right man, and she's worked through her trauma, and she's got married, and now she's pregnant herself. Ooh, she's gonna have a baby with him. It's supposed to be some kind of happy ending for her, and it just doesn't feel right for me. It completely undoes all her character development in the book so far, and it's a kick in the teeth to child-free women like myself, for a woman to only be able to get a happy ending when she's married and pregnant, It perpetuates this awful idea that the only reason a woman wouldn't want kids is if she's had trauma, and once she's healed from that trauma, she'll definitely want kids again. Or when a woman finds the right man, then she'll definitely want kids. Or how a woman can think she's happy, but she won't really be happy until she's married with kids, and all of that rubbish. All of that rubbish. I hate it. The supposed happy ending part of this book goes against everything Maeve spent the rest of the book saying and believing and arguing for. And to me, that kind of ruined the rest of the book for me. It made it all feel kind of pointless, and it left me feeling annoyed and angry and really confused about what the author's intentions were with any of this novel. I feel like this book had so much potential, but ruined itself with that ending. I do have many thoughts on this, but first I want to draw some comparisons between this book and another book which I first read maybe 3 or 4 years ago now, but which stuck with me because I thought it had a really great representation of a child-free woman. And I want to directly draw some comparisons between these books, and then we'll talk about my conclusions at the end. So The Cows by Dawn Porter felt far more well-rounded and more accepting of everyone and every type of lifestyle, especially in terms of the child-free character in it. It felt like it was more accurate to real life. It felt like it had better representation of child-free women, especially because the child-free protagonist in The Cows stuck to her values throughout, and she didn't have some big happy ending where, she got pregnant and had a baby and now her life is fixed. I am aware there's some cultural differences between the books, because just like Mother is set in America, and it was written by an American-born author, whereas The Cows is set in England and was written by an English author. So maybe that's one of the reasons that I can relate to it a little bit more, but who knows. So The Cows follows the story of 3 women, each dealing with their own issues. One woman is a slightly older single mum who has been publicly shamed for a viral video of her which was taken without her consent. Another is a young woman in her early 20s who is grieving for the loss of her family, struggling with her own worries about her health and specifically getting cancer, and who is trying to get pregnant as quickly as possible. The third woman is Cam, a woman in her mid-30s who is a feminist blogger who is adamantly child-free, and I really, really liked most of Cam's character in this book. I thought she was pretty great. Cam regularly writes blogs about her views on basically everything in her life, about being a woman, about dating and relationships, and on feminist topics. Early on in the book, she writes a blog post which discusses how society in general is so obsessed with and judgmental about other people's sex lives. Here's an extract. How is it that such a private and intimate act like sex gains so much social traction? It makes no sense when society is as diverse as it is, that some still feel uncomfortable when others don't behave in a way that is considered normal. But we were just told what normal was, weren't we? It was written in the books before we were born that monogamy was the way to go, that we're supposed to find the one, get married, have kids. But maybe monogamy isn't for everyone. Maybe some people, like me, really don't have any fear of being alone. In fact, it's the end goal. I'm so happy not to be normal. At 36, I have no intentions to settle down. There are some people in my life that find that unbearable. I can't be any other way. There are more single women in their 30s and 40s than at any other point in history. We're the fastest growing demographic, but being single doesn't mean you want or deserve less sex. And so I love that right from the beginning of this book, Cam is this strong, independent, confident woman who is happy with herself and by herself, even when this goes against everything else that society is telling her and all the pressures that the people around her are putting on her. As I think I've said, I did relate to Cam's character a lot in that I've always felt like I'd rather be happy alone than stuck with the wrong person just for the sake of having someone. But it's not just relationship norms that Cam pushes back on, it's, as you can probably guess, expectations around having children as well. So Cam writes a blog post titled, "Why I Don't Want Children," because, in her words, it's about her, about taking control of her life in the bravest, most honest way possible. She's happy, her choices are right, and it's important to her that everyone understands that. Cam knows what she's about to say will get a strong reaction, and here's an abridged version of that post. I don't want kids, and no, I'm not sad or selfish or self-obsessed or mean. I'm a kind, funny, 36-year-old who was loved by both of my parents and who gets plenty of sex. I'm attractive, fit, healthy, a great lover, and a good friend. I've never been sexually abused, I've had happy relationships, and I like myself very much. I just don't want kids. That doesn't mean I'm not very nice. I also don't hate children. I'm an auntie, and I love my nieces and nephews very much. I'm not, however, desperate to be relevant to them in any way more than the aunties who have their own children are. They're not my surrogate offspring. There are lots of reasons why not having children works for me. I'm a writer and spend most of my time alone, as I previously mentioned. I love that part of my life so much, and I know I'd have to fight for it if I had a child. I believe that if I had a child and struggled to find the time to write, then I'd feel like something was missing. So why would I want to do that? I relate to so much of this and found this to be far more accurate and helpful to the overall discourse around child-free women than Maeve's kind of half-hearted whimpers of, "Oh, I just never thought motherhood was for me," before running off and crying in a bathroom, you know? Not that child-free women in real life have to be strong and certain and sure all the time. It's just I can't help but feel, with so few representations of us in fiction, and so few positive representations of us in fiction, it's nice to see one who is certain and strong and unapologetic, and one whose decision not to have children wasn't caused by personal trauma. It's refreshing. It's really, really nice. I also really appreciated here how Cam shows you can have kids in your life without them having to be the centre of your life, you know? She's like, well, I'm an auntie, I see them occasionally, but they're not my surrogate children. That's it, I'm just an auntie. I appreciated that a lot. But more than that, she's like, these are my passions in life. Why would I want to give them up for something that I'm not passionate about? And I think that's a really important way of framing things, because I see so many people online, especially fundy women, who say things like, oh, I pity these women who don't want children, who only care about their jobs. Ha ha ha, have fun stuck in the rat race, being a slave to someone else forever. But that's like how I feel about them having children. I feel like for me having kids would be like being a slave to someone else forever. I would be stuck doing something I didn't want. I think with a lot of these women, they don't necessarily see that just because they maybe don't enjoy some aspects of work, that doesn't mean that the rest of us don't find enjoyment in it. Does that make sense? I mean, like, ultimately, all people are responsible for answering to or helping out or looking after other people at some point in our lives, right? So why shouldn't we decide for ourselves who those people are? Why does it have to be, well, if I have to look after someone, it's going to be these children that I birth? Why does it have to be that way? Why can't I say, well, if I'm going to answer to someone, if I'm going to look out for someone, I want it to be my followers, my subscribers, the people who I help with charity work, with donations to charity. I want it to be the people that I give back to. I want it to be the animals that I help when I do this volunteering and this and so on, you know? Why can't I decide who it is? Why does it have to be children? And I also really resent the presentations of work where people act like it has to be a slog, like it has to be this awful, terrible thing that you hate. It's like, ooh, it's a part of life you have to put up with. I'm like, why does it have to be? Why can't it be a part of life that we enjoy and embrace and look forward to? You're right that most of us, at least, do all have to work. So why not encourage us to do something that we're passionate about instead of just portraying it as this thing, this inevitable thing that we're all going to hate and be miserable with. I literally, like, I spoke about this in my poetry book as well, because I have a poem about, like, reflecting on what my life could very easily have become if I'd just made some different choices in my youth. And then I discuss it in a little bit more, and I've got this section at the back where I discuss some of the photos I include in the book, why I included them, and why I've paired certain photos up with certain poems and stuff, and so I've got some little notes in there. And so in one of them I talk about, like, you know, basically what I thought my life was going to turn out like when I was younger, and how it wasn't at all what I wanted. It wasn't what I wanted to do, but I felt like it was what I was going to have to do because that's just what life is. And that's what life was like for me as a kid, because I grew up in this tiny little market town in South Yorkshire, and my family had no money. It was a struggle, and it was hard, and like I said before, like, I had to start working at 14 and stuff like that, but I always just saw these people who were living for the weekend, who hated their jobs, who never made more than minimum wage, who were struggling to work enough hours, who were, like, scraping things together and living on credit, and I just thought that's how life was. And I thought that when I grew up, I would end up doing shop work like my mum, or if I did manage to do something a little out there, a little, you know, better than my family, then I'd be a teacher. That was it. That was the pinnacle of what I thought I could do with my life, what I thought I was allowed to do with my life. Because when I was a kid, I always heard things like, oh, you know, not for folks like us, things like that. And yeah, it really puts a dampener on things. I always loved the idea of performing, and I loved the idea of creating, but I was never told I could seriously do that as a career, which is funny because here I am now. But it took me kind of far longer to get out of that mindset than it should have. And I think that's why it's important that we have portrayals in the media of people who love their jobs, who really enjoy them, who are following their passions, and who can't wait to get to work every day, and it's not a burden because they love what they're doing. Sure, some people don't like their jobs, and I know because I did it for years, but there are also so many people out there who do love their jobs, regardless of what field that's in, regardless of what role you're working in, or what hours you work, or if you work for yourself or someone else or anything. There are so many paths you can go down career-wise, and so many opportunities, and so many different things you can try. You just kind of have to find the one that's right for you. And I think it's really unhelpful and kind of damaging to people to just be constantly told, well, you'll never be happy, so put up with what you can get. Because I think that's so untrue. I think everyone deserves happiness, and you should always be striving for happiness. And if you can find a job that makes you happy, then you go for it, because it is possible. And so that's why, sorry, I'm kind of getting off track here, I'm rambling a bit, it's my brain fog. But this is why I really like this portrayal of Cam in this book, because she clearly loves her job, and I love my job. And that's why I kind of saw a lot of similarities, you know, like, I work for myself, I get to create all the time, I set my own hours, I'm genuinely passionate about what I do, I genuinely care about what I do, same as Cam. And so I have to ask, like, if there's something that, I mean, I'm very certain I don't want to be a mother, but let's just say I was on the fence. Why would I give up something that I love and I'm passionate about, like having all of my time to work on the projects I want and the hobbies I want and the job that I have? Why would I give up any of that for something that I think could make me miserable? It just doesn't make sense. There are plenty of women who are going to be happy with motherhood, and therefore it's worth making some sacrifices for. And there's plenty of people who can do it all. I know I'm not one of them, and I don't want to be one of them, so why should I? So that's why I kind of really appreciate Cam's character framing this in this way. And it does make me kind of sad how Maeve's job is portrayed in comparison in Just Like Mother. Maeve is clearly good at her job, like really good, but she's underpaid, she's undervalued, she's treated badly by her employers and her co-workers. Eventually she gets fired, and then she struggles for a while, and throughout the whole thing it's really unclear whether she actually enjoys her job or not. In some scenes it seems like she does, but then in others it's almost like she feels guilty for enjoying it and wanting to work so much, and it's portrayed like her enjoying her job and it being her focus in life is this bad negative thing. Very odd. Again, the perspective of the author and the character feel quite unclear. They're a little confusing. I'm not entirely sure what she was going for. Whereas with Cam, it's very clear that she loves her job and she finds it very fulfilling, and I really enjoyed that portrayal. That said, there are some aspects of Cam's writing that I disagree with, such as this passage. Of course, I know that if I did have a child, I would experience the kind of love that would probably fill in all the gaps and solve all the worries that I have, but they wouldn't give me the time I have to do the other things that I love in life. So really, I can gain nothing from having a child because I would lose so many of the things that are important to me. I get where she's coming from. I personally didn't relate to this. I do worry that if I ever had a child, I wouldn't be able to love it. And I don't think there are any gaps in my life that a baby could fill. No. So I wouldn't want a statement like this to be representative of all child-free people, but I'm also aware that that's just my opinion and my experience, and that there are going to be some child-free people out there who do feel like this, and I think it's important to represent all of our different viewpoints, because not every child-free person feels the same and thinks the same and has the same views. So that was more of a just, I don't relate to this, rather than this is bad sort of thing. Cam goes on to write, I'm in no hurry to settle down. I do not feel empty. Nothing is missing. You probably think I'm selfish. I think I'm a revelation. Family ask me if I worry I'll feel unfulfilled in the future because I never had kids, to which I think, are there not billions of women out there who feel unfulfilled because they did have kids? Isn't choice basically what feminism is all about? As a society, we have to stop valuing women on whether they have babies or not. My decision not to have a family of my own will mean that some people will always think I've failed, that I'm tragic in some way. But there's nothing tragic about my life, because I love everything about it, and I'm especially excited for my future. And I love this little segment because it very accurately represents how I feel about myself. In other blog posts, Cam addresses wider issues in society and how a person's ability to be pregnant and give birth has ultimately led to our oppression more times than it's not. This is in stark contrast to Emily's lectures in Just Like Mother about how pregnancy and motherhood is what makes us special and different and therefore better. Instead, Dawn and her character Cam, they explore how it makes us different, and so how often men and patriarchal societies have used that as a way to exploit us and keep us oppressed, and how we don't need to let them do that anymore. The only thing that really ever separated men and women was that women got lumbered with the wombs, right? The fact that the babies grew in the women's tummies, then got pushed out their vaginas and fed from their breasts gave men a right to delegate women to the primary carers of children. I'm sure it made perfect sense to everyone at one time for the females of the species to abandon all other ambition and commit to a life of motherhood. But what if the women didn't have a child? Then, other than what we've been indoctrinated to believe, as in that a woman's function is to have children, if she doesn't, she's somehow incomplete, what really separates a man and woman in terms of what they can achieve, what they should be paid, whose boss they could be? Nothing. The truth is, a woman without a child is as available and capable as any man. Even more so, possibly, as many of those men will have families to get home to. But child-free women, we're as free as birds to crack on with whatever job is in hand. No tie to a home, no pressure to be anywhere else. We could literally take over the world with all the time we have, which is probably why a lot of men like to put childless women down, call us heartless, selfish, and presume we're lesbians. They have to rationalise that there's something wrong with us because the reality of the threat we pose is possibly a little too terrifying to bear. I'm not trying to encourage more women to choose childlessness, but I am encouraging those that do to wear the badge with pride. We, the child-free, can bridge the gap between men and women and achieve true equality because there's nothing that makes us unequal. We can boldly say that men are no better, stronger, or more worthy of status, money, or power. Women with children are rock stars. Women without children are superheroes. Together we can take over the world. So there was a lot in this little segment. I'm not sure I 100% agree with all this character's ideas. I definitely think it lacks a bit of nuance in places, and the reality and history is a little more complex than this. It's definitely lacking talking about the importance of mothers in the feminist movement, although she does address this later in the book, so let's not be too harsh on it there. And it definitely lacks any representation of trans women and men, but the idea posed about how often men belittle and put down child-free women, that's something I have consistently experienced since I've been speaking about this stuff online, and I do have to agree with this character's ideas when it comes to that. I found that so many men try to threaten me with, oh, you'll just end up alone, no real man would want you, you're selfish and ugly and stupid and heartless and so on. And I do wonder if it does all come from a place of jealousy or contempt or feeling threatened by someone like me. I see so many misogynistic men posting online about how women just need to have babies and blah blah blah, and then using that as a way to control us and manipulate us, so and kind of threaten us into lowering our standards and doing what they want and all sorts of stuff like that. So of course, when those kinds of men see a woman who's happy alone, who doesn't want children, then what tools do they have to try and manipulate and control us anymore? They don't. It makes us a threat to them. So they resort to things like, oh, you need us to provide for you. But again, no, we don't. Plenty of us women are more intelligent, more resourceful, more successful than men like that, and don't need anyone else to provide anything for us. It is literally a threat to these kinds of misogynists. And of course, there are plenty of wonderful men out there who see women like this and they think, damn, hell yeah, an equal partner, that's hot as hell. We could build something amazing together. They don't see us as threats, but as allies, and that's wonderful. But the ones who do try and belittle us for our choices to be child-free or to remain single or anything like that, I think it's because they do feel weak, they do feel threatened. But I also kind of want to take this moment to remind you that, like, it's not just independent child-free women who are a threat to these men. It's not just independent child-free women who are strong and whatever. No. All women are a threat to misogynistic douchebags. Because we need to realize that despite what we've been told over and over and over in the past, there are so many different ways to be strong and have value as a woman. And going with or against the grain doesn't negate this at all. All women can be strong and empowered. Women with kids, women without kids, women who are married, women who are cohabiting, single, just dating around, gay and bisexual women, asexual women, transgender people, unemployed people, retired people, students, artists, foster parents, animal lovers, people in polyamorous relationships, people in monogamous relationships, people who want relationships but don't currently have one, people who want kids but don't currently have one, or who can't have kids or anything like that. There's nothing wrong with any of it. All of these people have the ability to be strong and empowered and be absolutely amazing and wonderful. There's no right or wrong way to live your life. And I know I say this in a lot of videos, but I'm going to keep repeating it because it's true. There's nothing selfish or weak or heartless or whatever other insults they want to throw at us. There's nothing bad about living your life your way. Not at all. And so when these misogynists turn around and say, oh, well, you need a man like me, otherwise you're going to end up alone forever. Oh, you need me to have a baby with you, or you're going to be miserable. Like, no, don't listen to them. As long as you're not hurting anyone else, then whatever your personal choices are for your lifestyle, please remember that, like, if anyone throws insults at you for just being happy, then they're only showing their own weakness and insecurities, not yours. Does that make any sense? I don't know, I'm getting tired at this point. I'm feeling a little fuzzy-headed again. I hope I'm making sense. We're nearly done. We got this. Okay. But of course, like all of us who talk about being child-free online or in public, the character of Cam gets a hell of a lot of comments. Some are great comments, like the woman who tells her, your column about not wanting kids was so amazing. I never wanted children, and it's been hard to say that out loud sometimes because of judgment. So thank you. And another one which was, I want you to know how much I appreciate it that you say what so many of us are too scared to say. And honestly, it is absolutely wonderful getting comments like this. I get it quite a lot, again, on my child-free videos and stuff like that, and it's really nice to know that I'm not alone. It's wonderful to hear that I'm helping other people and having a positive impact on their lives, and those kinds of comments mean so much to me, so I could relate to that in this book as well. Then there's an article published in the fictional world naming Cam the face of childless women. And I do have a little bit of a personal issue with this because of the use of the phrase childless. While technically accurate, I'm not really a fan of it because I think childless implies there's something missing that should be there, whereas child-free indicates it's a personal choice where you're saying, well, I don't want this additional thing to my in my life, you know what I mean? Like I would say a cheeseless pizza is implying that the pizza should have cheese, but it's missing, and now it's just quite disappointing, isn't it? Whereas a pepperoni-free pizza implies that the pizza's already complete and that the pepperoni would have been an addition on it, but the pizza's still pretty great without it, you know? That's where I kind of draw the line between childless and child-free, and it's why I prefer the term child-free, but that's more of just a personal preference. Some people might disagree with me. That's absolutely okay too. But others are less happy as well, and Cam gets quite a bit of backlash, and while doing an interview she gets asked the typical questions, which I also get all the time, like, so, tell me about what happened to make you not want to have children. Can you pinpoint a moment in your childhood that may have triggered this in you? But I really like Cam's response, which is just, no, not really. She also gets asked, surely a pretty girl like you could have any man she wanted. And she replies, oh, well, I'm not sure the way I look has anything to do with it. I was raised in an environment where it was normal for women to have children. All three of my sisters do. Cam says happy with her methodical response, feeling a little more confident. Yeah, but what was the moment you decided not to be a mother? Janice pushes. Well, there wasn't one really. I just always knew. And then, of course, the public bring up all the same things too. She gets asked these things like, don't you worry that one day you'll retire and regret choosing your career over your children? Are you really just saying you don't want children as self-defense against those who might say you're only not having them because you've never found the one? Maybe as that clock inside you slows down, you'll have a change of heart. You sound like a dried-up old hag. What's next? The face of mad cat women? The face of, fucking hell, I'm suddenly 80 and haven't left the house for 40 years. To which she has excellent replies to all. But I think it's important to mention comments like this in a story like this, because we do get asked stuff like this all the time. We do get told stuff like this all the time. And it's funny to me how people with kids never get asked the same things, do they? Imagine if a woman announced she was pregnant and people turned around to her and asked, yeah, but don't you worry one day you're gonna get old and regret choosing children over anything else in your lives? Or, are you really having a child because you want one? Or is it just self-defense because you think your relationship alone isn't enough for you? Or, sure, you want this baby now, but you'll have a change of heart and regret it, I'm sure. Like, I've said this in another video, but imagine if people spoke to pregnant women the way they do to child-free women. It would be horrific. I just don't get why we constantly feel the need to question the motives of child-free people. Surprising to me. Cam also gets backlash from one of her sponsors who wants to make sure she's not alienating mothers by talking about the fact she doesn't want kids. But again, why is there never any thought to this the other way around? Sponsors seem fine with people posting about their kids and being a mother and being pregnant and all that stuff, with no thought to how that might alienate child-free people. Or at least I've never heard of that. Maybe it has happened and I'm happy to be proven wrong, but I don't know. But I do have to admit, I personally have unfollowed or muted people on social media because I just did not want to see their kid all the time. It just doesn't interest me. I don't want to open Instagram and look at your pregnant belly. I don't want to see ultrasound photos. I don't want to see baby photo after baby photo after baby photo. I don't want to physically gag because your kid has food smeared all over its face and I can't stand that on anyone. No, thank you. I don't want to see any of that. So I do think in that way, mothers posting about being mothers can alienate their audience too. But you know what? That's their choice. They can happily post any of that stuff that they want to at any time. They're allowed to share whatever part of their lives they want to. And it's up to me as the consumer to decide if I want to see it or not. I don't think I'd ever shame a person for sharing the fact they're a mother or a father or whatever, as long as they're not exploiting their kids. It's just that I personally don't want to see it. I don't think it's a big deal. I think we should all be allowed to post whatever we want about our lives like that. I just don't see how any person saying, hey, this is the choice I made for myself and my body, and it's okay if you want to do whatever you want to do too, I don't see how that is something we should be shamed for alienating people. I don't get it. I think one of the big things I want to talk about, though, is something which I personally had people message me about. And, let me read you this extract from the book first. So Cam writes, one suggestion that's popped up after my articles and in my inbox multiple times is that I'm wasting my womb. That's right, because I have a womb that I didn't ask for, I'm disrespecting the power of being female, because to have this empty sac and not use it is apparently unthinkable. which you'll notice is very similar to a lot of the narratives pushed by the cult in Just Like Mother, and how they think there's something wrong with us if we don't utilise this body part that we didn't ask to be born with. Cam's character in The Cows goes on to write, "But wait, I didn't order this piece of equipment from Amazon. I was embedded with it at birth, and unlike an oven, the household object that seems to be compared to the female reproductive system the most, I cannot simply use it, take out the contents, eat them, and get on with my day. I think we're all aware that parenting lasts a lot longer than a jacket potato. So no, I won't use it for what it's capable of. But that isn't to say that I haven't used it my entire life. My womb is what makes me a woman. How can that be a waste?" Which is definitely an interesting take on things. I don't quite agree with that last line, but again, it's more of a personal thing than anything. Personally, I don't think my womb is what makes me a woman. I would still be very much a woman without it. I don't think wombs make women. Honestly, I don't much like mine, and I would be very happy if it disappeared. But I do understand how some people feel personally attached to bits of their body like that, and I think if a person goes around and saying, "I feel like a woman because of my womb," there's nothing wrong with that. I think the problem arises where people are like, "You can only feel like a woman because of your womb, and your womb must make you feel like a woman." That's a problem, that's not okay. Bit of an iffy line, but more of just a personal gripe. Again, I think this is one of those things where, like, it's okay for an individual to say, but it's not something you should push onto other people, if that makes sense. It's not representative of all women, basically. That said, though, the concept in general of, like, well, if you were born with a body part, you must love it, otherwise you're offending people who don't have it, like, that whole sort of thing, that's so annoying to me. It's so annoying to me. And I do get it all the time. I get a lot of comments like this and messages like this, and in the series of videos I did answering your questions about being child-free by choice, I mentioned in one of them how I often kind of wish I was infertile. It would save me a lot of stress and worry and time and money and everything. And it might sound horrible, but yeah, I do wish for it. If I found out I was infertile today, it would be a celebration. But when I mentioned that before, one woman in particular took real offense to it, and she left me this really long lecture about how she wanted to have kids, but she was infertile, and so me saying that I wished I was infertile myself was somehow disrespectful to her. And I don't know if this is like the autism making me not see this or something else, but I don't get it. I don't get how me wishing one thing for my own body is disrespectful to anyone else's body or circumstance. What I want for my own body has no impact at all on what other people can or should want or do with their bodies. Like, I'm sorry for the woman who is infertile and wanted kids. I absolutely do wish her body allowed her to do with it what she wants. But I also wish my body allowed me to do with it what I want, which is not having kids. I feel like even though our two ideal outcomes are opposites, she wants to give birth to kids in her body, I don't. I feel like even though we had opposite outcomes, we both had the same problem in that our bodies are doing the opposite of what we want them to do. And so in that case, I felt solidarity with this woman, whereas she saw me as the enemy and got kind of mad at me. And that was a little bizarre to me. I know the topic of having kids and fertility is a bit of an emotional one, so let me give you another lower stakes example of how ridiculous it is to get angry about what someone else wants to do with their own body. I was born with blonde hair, and I hate how it looks on me. I hate my natural hair colour. My eyelashes and eyebrows are too pale for my skin, I think, and I just look stupid when they're natural. In the summer, I tan quite a lot, and so my blonde hair just sort of blends in with my skin and looks really weird on me, and I just end up looking wrong. Every day as a kid, I would look in the mirror and I didn't feel like I was seeing myself. The picture I saw in the mirror and the picture I saw of me in my head did not line up. I felt ugly, I felt disgusting. I didn't like the way I looked at all. So, when I was 19, I did something about it and I started to dye my hair. And over the years, it's been brown, it's been almost black, it's been ginger, red, pink, purple, every colour. To this day, I regularly tint my lashes and eyebrows to make them darker, changed my outwards appearance until it fits what I see in my head, and now I feel like I look like me and I'm very happy with my appearance. I look how I've always imagined myself looking. I feel like myself, I feel comfortable, I feel happy, it's great. I don't think anyone would have a problem with that, right? And I don't think anyone has a problem with me sitting here saying, I love dyeing my hair, I want to dye my hair, I wish my hair was naturally pink. I don't think anyone has a problem with that, right? I hope not anyway. Because how does it affect you? It doesn't. I'm talking about my own hair and my own body. So what if I dislike my own natural hair? But can you imagine how ridiculous it would be if someone sat there and lectured me about how dyeing my hair is disrespectful to them as a blonde woman because I'm somehow saying that blonde is an inferior hair colour to all, and I'm making them feel bad about their blonde hair by dyeing my own, by wishing my hair wasn't blonde. Or imagine if another person comes along and says like, well, I have dark hair and I would kill for naturally blonde hair. Do you know how much time and effort and money I spend to keep my hair blonde, and you just have it and you're getting rid of it? That's disrespectful to me. Do you see how ridiculous that is? It's the same thing when it comes to any body part, including wombs and fertility, you know? By personally disliking my own hair, by changing my own hair, that's not a statement about anyone else's hair. Blonde hair can still look stunning on other people. There's nothing wrong with being blonde. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be blonde. And there's nothing wrong with changing your hair to be blonde. I just don't like myself as a blonde. I don't want to be blonde myself. And it's the same with fertility. So many people love being fertile. So many people wish they were fertile. I don't want it. I wish I wasn't. And that shouldn't affect anyone else, because it's my body and what I want from it. So yeah, it absolutely annoys the hell out of me when people tell me I'm wasting my womb, wasting fertility. Do you know how many people would kill for this? Do you know, or how it's awful of me to not want to have kids or to wish I was infertile? Like, it annoys the hell out of me. So I liked that this book brought that up. I really, really did. Seriously, let people do what they want with their own bodies without it being seen as a judgment or anything at all to do with anyone else. Simple as that. Anyway, rant aside, towards the end of the book, Cam accidentally falls pregnant because her implant fails and she immediately schedules an abortion. Of course. Her family, however, tried to convince her to continue with the pregnancy because that's just what women do. That's what they would do. And then there's this whole scene with Cam telling her mum that she doesn't want to end up like her because that's not what would make her personally happy. And then her mum takes great offence to that, which is something that hit incredibly close to home for me. And then the mother starts telling Cam that by Cam publicly saying that she doesn't want kids, that's somehow a personal insult to her as a mother. That is ridiculous. Again, makes no sense to me. But again, it's also what people have told me in the comments, and I think it's laughably stupid. People have said that because I don't want kids, that's a slap in the face to my parents. And I'm like, how is it? I'm not telling them what they should or shouldn't have done with their bodies. What I do with my body and my life, and if I choose to have kids or not, has nothing to do with anyone else, especially not my parents. So I related to that a hell of a lot. But eventually they make up and the mother kind of starts to understand her a little bit more. But then, because, you know, there needs to be a twist, Cam dies in this tragic accident before she can have the abortion. And all the newspapers start reporting all this crap about how the face of childless women was pregnant, and Miss Stacy built a lucrative career out of her child-free lifestyle, and her fans had been shocked to discover she was actually 9 weeks pregnant. This has left her loyal followers torn by what some people are saying to be an emotionally corrupt money-making scam. And the first time I read this story unlocked this new fear in me of that, like this idea that accidents out of our control can happen and entirely change people's perceptions of us, even when our motives and plans and actions were the opposite, you know? Yeah, that freaked me out a bit. Thankfully, though, Cam's friend steps up and corrects the world and releases this public statement and redeems her reputation, which I liked. So ultimately, even though Cam ended up dead, I do think it was a happy ending for her because she left this amazing legacy. She stood by her values her entire life. She lived her life the way she wanted to, and I would say that's a happy ending in my book. I definitely preferred Cam's ending, despite her being dead. I definitely preferred that to Maeve's ending. With Maeve, we're led to believe that, yeah, she had a happy ending until the ominous cult reemerges, but apparently she only had her happy ending because she finally got married and got pregnant and spent her life playing with kids regularly, you know? I felt like that ending undermined everything else she said in the entire book, and that really, really bothered me. You also have to kind of contrast how both characters responded to intimate relationships in the two books. Cam and Maeve both had casual relationships with men. These men both wanted more from the women, but the women were reluctant to give it. With Cam, she didn't want to commit because she was afraid of losing her independence, but in the end, she decided to go for it before she died, because she realised that she was strong enough to love and be loved without losing herself, and I think that's a really empowering message. She realised that her relationships didn't have to be defined by other people's standards, and I think that's a wonderful message to put out there. It's very strong. I really, really liked it. Meanwhile, Maeve was scared of intimacy because of her past traumas, and she still ended up getting hurt a lot until she went away and got healed. And it's this really weird backwards message that apparently you're only adverse to monogamy if you have trauma, and then as soon as you're healed from that trauma, oh yeah, you absolutely want monogamy and marriage and kids and pregnancy and blah 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 and all the traditional stuff that everyone told her she was missing in her life. I feel like that's quite a harmful narrative, and it is perpetuating really harmful stereotypes, especially around child-free women and women who are single or who don't want relationships at all, or who have non-traditional relationships. So in that regard, I preferred Cam's story and her character arc in that as well. To conclude, because I'm exhausted and I don't know how much of this video has made sense, these are two books with very similar themes, and it's really nice to see child-free women and our stories and our values being discussed in mainstream fiction. I think that's really, really important. However, I do think some representations, even when they all try to be positive, I think some are more positive than others. I lean towards preferring representations like in The Cows rather than just like Mother, because while no means perfect, and there could have been a lot of improvements, and there could have been, honestly, a lot more representation for other kinds of women. Not the point, anyway. While not perfect, in The Cows, Dawn manages to represent so many different kinds of women and their relationships with motherhood, and she is far more inclusive and less judgmental. And I get the impression that through all her different characters, she personally has the opinion of do what is right for you, make the choice that is right for you. And I like that, I respect that, I think it's a good message to have, and I think Cam is a really positive representation of child-free women to have. I really liked her. On the other hand, Anne Heltzel's Just Like Mother confuses me a bit, because on the surface it seems like it should be a feminist piece, but ultimately it falls back into supporting the ideologies that it at first seemed to be critiquing. I don't get what the author's stance is throughout this novel, and it makes me uncomfortable, but not in the ways that the author intended. It's a horror novel, but it's meant to reflect society and hold up this mirror and say, hey, isn't this messed up? But for me, the true horror is the fact that for all it seems to be challenging traditional gender roles and ideas of motherhood, it ultimately just ends up falling back and supporting them, you know? That said, and this may be the cynic in me talking, I do wonder if this conclusion of and then she got married and pregnant and was happy wasn't really the author's idea at all, and was more pushed by the publishers, and was sort of thrown in to make the rest of the book's content more palatable to a more traditional and arguably more judgmental American audience, as that was its target. I do wonder if that was in there to kind of be like, oh look, we can have this really pro-child-free narrative, but then make it more palatable for the people who still want the traditional stuff. I do feel like having that ending undermines the rest of it, but I can understand from a marketing perspective why it maybe had to be done, but it still annoys the hell out of me. I don't know. Either way, I have many thoughts about both novels, and I think both have areas they can be improved, but on the whole, I'm just very happy to see and be able to discuss representations of child-free people, especially women, in popular fiction. And the fact that we're able to have these discussions so openly and I'm able to talk about this stuff, I think is a real amazing sign of progress, and I'm very happy to be able to do this. I would love to hear, though, down in the comments what you think of these two books if you've read them. I would also like to know what you think of other books with child-free protagonists, either representations that you like or don't like. Ultimately, I'd love to hear your own thoughts and suggestions about other representations of child-free people, not only in books, but in media in general. Tell me what you think of child-free, especially women, in films and TV as well, and so on. I'd love to hear your thoughts. But for now, if you've enjoyed this video, please leave a like, please subscribe if you want to see more content from me. I promise I won't be ill all the time, although this year I've had a few illnesses and I've lost my voice a couple of times and it's been a bit of a nightmare. Don't forget, if you'd like to read any of the poems that I discussed in this video as well, then my book is available now on Amazon. If you'd like to grab your own copies of either of the two main books that I discussed in this video, then I will leave affiliate links down in the video description as well. That means if you buy anything through those links, then I get a couple of pence back and it just helps support my channel and my work, and it's just a tiny little thing you can do that helps a little bit. Otherwise, if you'd like to support my work, because ad revenue is obviously down at the minute, I just had to take a week and a bit off for being ill, then you can support my work over on Patreon. That really helps me. I also publish things like video scripts over there and photos and other little behind the scenes bits like that, and yeah, I just really appreciate it, and it means I can keep making content like this for you even when I'm ill and dying like this. So thank you very much. If I don't get another video out before Christmas, then I really hope you all have an absolutely wonderful holiday period. However you are celebrating or not celebrating, have a lovely time, and for now, thank you for watching today. I'll see you all again really soon. Goodbye.